Labour won the election with the lowest ever share of the popular vote. The lowest ever. Of course, the sheer number of alternatives available today, which draw away from the Labour vote, like Liberal Democrats, Greens, Workers' Party of Britain, the Islamic Party, they will make comparisons with elections years ago obviously irrelevant. But there have been many alternatives available for quite a while now, and Labour's recent performance was worse than all of those. The Conservative Party's hilariously bad performance was down in part to reform and in part to being hilariously bad, and it wouldn't take an awful lot to sort that out in time for the next one in 2029 or whatever. This is how hilariously bad it all was. The recent election and the previous four, for comparison, registered voters increase at each election cycle, as you can see. And this is the first point of meaningful comparison. The turnout of registered voters was pretty spectacularly lower than the previous four at 28.8 million. Fully 3.2 million lower than 2019, and a historically tragic 59.9%. 59.9% wins the bronze medal of awful turnouts. The silver goes to 2004, quite recently, with 59.4%, so not all that much difference, and the gold goes to 2018, over 100 years ago, with 57.2%. So the third worst turnout ever. Winners, starting in 2010 with Cameron at 10.7 million, then 11.3, then 13.6 million for Theresa May and 14 million for Johnson in 2019. Labour's 9.7 million is 3,300,000 votes fewer than the Tories got in 2019. And if we put the runners-up, hold that thought, which my little arrow will do for you, and compare it to Labour's previous losing performances. 2010, 8.6 million, 2015, 9.3 million, 2017, a rather spectacular 12.8 million when Jeremy Corbyn came to the helm, then falling to 10.2 million in 2019. And remember, these are all the losers' totals, Labour's losing vote share, and they all pretty much equal or radically exceed their 2024 winning vote share. And they won because while in 2019 the Tories got 14 million votes, this then collapses to 6.8 million just 5 years later. That is less than half their 2019 votes, a vote collapse in excess of 7 million. Labour got fewer votes than their last losing total, and the Conservatives lost over half of their last winning total. This was the Marx Brothers election. The Conservatives will say the loss was due to reform. Reform will say that their voters would have stayed at home, which is true in my case, so it doesn't make any difference. Neither is actually true. We know the Labour winning vote was down on their 2019 loss, but not by a huge amount. It was down by 500,000, half a million, so we can largely ignore that. Reform got 4.1 million votes, so that looks like a partial explanation, but we need another 3 million. You'll remember that that horrendous turnout number for this election was at 28.8 million, and that is 3.2 million less than 2019, which was 32 million. Reform gets 4 million votes and the turnout is 3 million lower. That's the missing 7 million. Reform probably did get a few from Labour. Labour's winning total was 500,000 lower than their previous losing total, but still relatively few. So that 7 million collapse in 2024 compared to 2019 is split approximately 50-50 between those going to reform and those simply not voting. So 3 million need to be enticed back, and the other 4 million need to be on the same side of the fence, whatever that fence might be, as the 3 million who stayed away, along with the other 7 million who stuck around, in order for totals to return to approximate 2019 levels and preferably greater. So the following outcome was replicated in almost 1/3 of the total seats. This is just one example. That's 2024, and in red are the 2019 numbers. So Tories lost about 14,500 here. Labour gained 2,000-ish, Reform got 8,500, so that's 10,500. Greens plus 400, so that's about 11,000 accounted for. And for the final piece of the puzzle, turnout was 4,000 lower. So assuming all that is Tory, that's 15,000, and the Tory loss was 14,500. So Reform plus a little bit of extra vote going to Labour, plus Tories stay at home equals 2024 close race edged by the Tories. That concept, with different numbers and different positions of the parties, was replicated in another 184 seats. And in another 56 seats, Unite the Right doesn't quite win, but it does come a lot closer. And Reform hold all the cards. The Tories might get those 3 million stay-at-homes back, but there's no guarantee they're going to get the Reform votes back. Of course, Reform might just advocate for a fairer proportional vote system. Comparing seats to vote share, Labour did very well, 63% of seats compared to just 34% vote share. Conservatives did okay, 19% of seats for 25% vote share. Lib Dems did almost perfectly, 11% of seats for 12% of votes, and Reform did catastrophically badly, under 1% of seats compared to 14% of the votes. And there's a nice little graphic representation. Those votes translated into those seats. It is a shame that the Reform vote was no bigger than the 4 million UKIP vote in 2015. We were hearing murmurs of around 5 million, and that would have been a nice big increase, but in the end it was just the same UKIP 4 million that voted for Reform. And they say, oh yes, but Reform is a new party. It's really not. Reform was Farage, UKIP was Farage. It's pretty much one and the same, so it is a shame that we didn't get a few more votes for Reform. On the subject of that proportional vote share, they might advocate for that, but it's not going to go anywhere because turkeys don't vote for Christmas. So that's not going to happen. But they do have a very strong bargaining position for advocating for some form of unite the right, of everybody being on the same side of the fence. The only question is it under a Conservative banner, or is it under a Reform banner, or is it under a completely new banner?